Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I hate to break up all the wonderful lunchtime conversation, but I wanted to introduce myself. I am Deborah Buffton. I serve as the chair of the program committee of the League of Women Voters of the La Crosse area. And on behalf of the board of directors, we want to thank you for all coming here and welcome you to this October Lunch and Learn. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, nonprofit political organization. We encourage the informed and active participation of citizens in government. We work to increase understanding of major public policy issues and influence public policy through education and advocacy. We act on public policy-based positions established through member study and agreement. As a nonpartisan organization, we neither support nor oppose any political candidate or party. Today's program is being live streamed and recorded, and it will be available for viewing on our website after the program. We will have time for questions and answers after the presentation. If you are here in the room, we ask you to raise your hand, and I think Jane will bring a microphone around to you, and you can ask your question. If you are joining us virtually, then you can type a question into the question box at the bottom of your screen anytime during the presentation. Our speakers today are Judy Nagel and Howard Hauser. Judy Nagel serves on the Wisconsin Statewide Committee for American Promise. She's active with the Green Bay Rotary Club, Vision Greater Green Bay, Leader Ethics, and numerous other statewide and local organizations. Howard Hauser is co-founder and partner of Market Masters, LLC. He has been a Rotarian for over 17 years and has been past president of 2 clubs, including his current club, the Rotary Club of Green Bay. And we welcome both of them here today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you all for being here today and listening to us talk about our issue. Howard and I are both members of the same Rotary Club, and we've given this presentation to numerous Rotary clubs. We are both past presidents of our club, and Rotary is not a political organization. We guard that very carefully, but we do support civic engagement. And Rotary, most people don't know this, some Rotarians actually don't know it, Rotary is one of the founders of the United Nations, and to this day is the only non-government organization that has a permanent seat in the General Assembly. And this has been immensely helpful in our efforts to eradicate portfolio across the world. So you will see Howard and I discuss issues. Howard and I favor 2 different political parties, but we see our common interest in this issue. So let us begin, and I'm going to share with you the Rotary presentation that we do because it's a very solid foundation for having civic discussion. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk to you about the idea of positive peace and how a disturbing trend toward pay-to-play politics is undermining that peace and civic engagement in the U.S., and some solutions that you may want to support. And I'll start by connecting a few of the dots on patterns you may have sensed but had not had time to look at in depth. The first part will focus on the problem. Then we will review some very positive signs and 3 ways to take action. The focus of this talk is a civic foundation in which politics occurs, not politics per se. That is, I hope that we can discuss the rules we would want if we did not know where we stood on an issue. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. And we'd like to talk about it through the lens of positive peace. Positive peace is the optimum environment for human potential to flourish. Of course, Rotary has a long history of working on peace and conflict resolution and prevention. And as you may know, Rotary formed a partnership in 2014 with the Institute for Economics and Peace, which studies positive peace. Their research shows 8 pillars that contribute to positive peace. These 8 pillars predict lower future physical violence, greater societal well-being, and higher economic growth. Thanks to the efforts of groups like Rotary, positive peace has been growing around the world. In 2017, 6 champions were honored at the UN Day of Peace, including work done on the peace treaty in Colombia. And in 2018, Rotarians celebrated projects in Uganda and Mexico. But positive peace has actually declined in North America. Though we started relatively high, our overall positive peace score has deteriorated by 4.5% since 2005. That ranks us as number 18 in the world, and Canada number 11. Both have seen deteriorations. So, how do we look at this as Rotarians? And this is something that we say at each of our club meetings weekly. It's our 4-way test. I'll have you go back, if you would. The 4-way test is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? So, this is what we believe as Rotarians, and this is what we bring to this issue. So, the first question, is it the truth? Clearly, if voters do not know the truth of who is trying to influence them, we cannot have the free and open exchange of ideas on which democracy depends. But with rule changes, certain groups no longer have to disclose their donors. This created a way for funders to influence campaigns without voters knowing who they are dealing with and what their interests are. This is the so-called dark money. And as you can see, the amounts have increased dramatically. And it is not traceable. Potentially can come from foreign sources, say when a corporation contributor is foreign owned. So you have a situation where state or federal races, where there's an attack ad at the 11th hour, which states something that's untrue, but the candidate doesn't know who's behind it. How do they respond? How do they have an open and honest debate? And this actually happened in Montana. They had rules in their state constitution that were overridden by Citizens United. This led to a flood of money, much of it out of state, and upset a state legislative race. And this is actually shown in the movie Dark Money. So in response, State Senator Lou Jones said, I'll have you go back one slide, there will never be truth in politics until voters can follow the money. So we can say that the rules that have been adopted make it harder to know the truth. Prior to Citizens United, the state of Wisconsin had various guardrails in terms of funding around elections. When Citizens United was ruled upon, all states that had guardrails, those guardrails became illegal. In Alaska, for example, you could not donate to a campaign in Alaska if you were from outside the state. So it's dramatically changed what we can see happen in our campaigns today. And with that, I'm going to turn the rest of the presentation over to my fellow Rotarian, Howard.
So don't advance it until I tell you, because unlike Judy, I'm all over the place. Oh, that clicker, that's right. Oh, the one with the kill button too. Uh-oh. All right, so I have nobody to explain except myself. All right, so I'm going to carry on. Hit the button, Max. So the next question we ask, is it fair to all concerned? If government is accountable to the people that it serves, and ours is supposed to be that way, the more people that support a public position or issue, the more likely it is that that will become acted on and become part of the legal system. Well, here's what the research says. And as you know, I'm a business guy, so I like research, I like numbers. I don't like to just talk about concepts without knowing. And I'm sorry, this one is supposed to be percentages, but you get the idea. Across the bottom is the percent of support that a policy gets. So the further you go to the right, the more support that idea or that policy gets. On the left, going up the side, the probability that the policy will be adopted. So, and we've graphed two different groups of people. Here, the average citizen, and you can see no matter how many people think it's a good idea, you get about the same amount of adoption. But you take the economic elite, the more of those people that think it's a good idea, the higher the probability of adoption. Now, this is not something that I said, it was research. And I was looking for it last night. I was scrambling because I don't remember the source at this point, but if anybody cares. Yeah, there you go. It's on the bottom. I was looking and looking and looking. I didn't go to the slides to look. Anyway, so it was research, the research that was done. So obviously the economic elites have a lot more to say about what's going on in and what gets adopted in our system. And with that, it's not surprising when you consider this important number. 76% of political spending comes from just 1/10% of our population. I'll say it again, 76% of the money being spent in politics comes from just 1/10% of our population. That means that nobody in this room has any say, because I don't think that any of us in this room are in that, in that upper echelon of economics. And probably most people, that is probably eliminates almost everybody in the state of Wisconsin. Think about that. So we don't have any real representation. We don't have a seat at the table. Contributions drive who does get a seat at the table, and their perspectives, what they're thinking, what they want, that's what gets acted on. And statistics, this is troubling, all right? It's scary. But it gets to be tragic when you think about, oh, good, it worked. Remember, and it's still going on, the opioid crisis. We all pretty much know at this point that was driven by big pharma. It was all about profits. I'm a business guy, but I can tell you what they were doing was not right. They were after the profits. So that's what can happen when it gets out of line. So the next question we ask, will build goodwill and better friendship? Well, I think the current system, I think we all know it's probably not doing that right now. We're not seeing a lot of friendship, and nice stuff going on. This is a series of that's been going on for quite a period of time. Back in 1964, you can see that the average person thought that 64% of people thought that government was run for the benefit of the people, while 29% thought it was for benefit of big interests. Look at it in the last point on here is from 2018, I believe. Yes, 2018. The 64 dropped to 21, the 29 grew to 76, and we don't have the updated numbers, but if you take the updated numbers, it's now the people who think it's for big business, it's now up to 90-something%. That doesn't surprise me. I don't think that probably surprises you either. So why do you think there's so much divisiveness in our country? And here's what I think. What I've been, because I think about this kind of stuff. Big money interests, I think they want us. They like this system. They like it this way. They want it this way. Because big money, they get everybody blaming the other guy, saying, no, it's your fault. No, yeah, well, I know that Judy's on the other side of the table. I don't know about all of you, but it's got to be her fault. It's not my fault, right? And so that's what's going on here in the world. And so we get outraged. You know, we're angry, and we end up distrusting each other. Each side points to the other, and it never gets resolved. But the big money people, they like that. That's what they want to see happen. Because while we're arguing among themselves, they're doing what they want to do and accomplishing what they want to accomplish, which ultimately gives them more power and more money. So finally, we ask, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Well, we can see so far, you know, that it's not beneficial to all the concerned, but there are some people, and that's the good news, there are some people that are actually stepping forward and talking about that, you know, people that matter and that they have a voice, you know, not me and Judy. And these people, you know, are standing up. You've got, here's examples, Republican and a Democrat, both have stepped forward and said, you know, how bad and how deleterious money in politics is, killing our system. And business leaders, you know, those folks that are not directly in politics, the business leaders find themselves endorsing ideas and spending money, you know, for political, to get involved in the politics, not to get involved, to avoid the negative results of being on the wrong side of an issue. So or getting involved and getting canceled. So this determines businesses. So we end up spending money, business people, you know, on to pushing ideas or supporting political parties, issues that we don't really want to, but we do that because we need to be at the table. We need to have the favor. We need to have access to the politicians who are making, you know, the decisions and the rules. What that does is it takes money away from innovation, excuse me, investing in long-term development, you know, creating better products and more value for you, the consumer, you know, and their customers, whoever they are. So it hurts the entire system. Gets hurt by that use of money. But there is a silver lining, because if you take a look at the numbers, and I don't have to explain these, they kind of jump right out at you. The vast majority of the people, which I'm sure that includes all the people in this room, think that money in politics is a problem and that we need to do something about it. And the overall average, 80+%. So there are already a lot of people working on this issue. 22 states have passed resolutions calling for an amendment, and that's a much longer discussion than we have here today, but the only way that you can fix the problem, because there's been a real quick summary, because there has been a couple of Supreme Court rulings, it means the only way to reverse that is through an amendment. Any legislation that gets passed will get struck down because the Supreme Court has already ruled. So that's not an option. You can't pass a law in Congress to try to fix this. It'll get struck down. The only option, and there's been, I forget the number, how many times that there have been amendments to fix the problems that the Supreme Court didn't get quite right. And so we need an amendment in order to fix the problem. 22 states have already called for that. We got within one vote of the state, was it the Senate? Okay, one vote in the Senate this past legislative year, and we had gotten that one more vote, we would have had a resolution. Wisconsin would have been the 23rd state. So we'll be going back, you know, next session, working at that again. There's 800 cities, towns, communities, municipalities throughout the country that are from blue, purple, red states that have all passed resolutions calling for their state legislators to get on the stick and get that done. In Wisconsin, there's 177 towns, villages, communities, counties that have passed resolutions calling for that. If you're interested, afterward, Judy has a map and a list of, you know, all those counties, just so you can see who they are. So there are people that are taking action and trying to move the ball forward to solve the issue. Yes, a U.S. constitutional amendment. Sorry if I wasn't clear about that. Yes, that is the only way to fix the problem. So, you had a comment, Judy?
First of all, I have on your tables the proposed amendment language. Now, when you do an amendment, you got to go to Congress and you have to get sponsors for the amendment. We were actually working with Mike Gallagher, so that's, picture has changed on that. But the proposed amendment is not one that is prescriptive. It's actually very short. I'll read it to you. Section 1. We, the people, have compelling sovereign interests in the freedom of speech, representative self-government, federalism, the integrity of the electoral process, and the political equality of natural persons. Section 2. Nothing in this Constitution shall be construed to forbid Congress or the states within their respective jurisdictions from reasonably regulating and limiting contributions and spending in campaigns, elections, or ballot measures. Section 3. Congress and the state shall have the power to implement and enforce this article by appropriate legislation and may distinguish between natural persons and artificial entities, including by prohibiting artificial entities from raising and spending money in campaigns, elections, or ballot measures. The state of Maine, which has passed the resolution, ran into an interesting situation a couple of years ago. There was a utility company in Canada that wanted to build utilities in Maine. So what that utility company did is it spent a great deal of money to influence a referendum on their election in order to get that utility company into Maine. Now, in hindsight, it's worked as a disadvantage to the state of Maine, but because there were no guardrails, they couldn't stop that flood of money from coming in and financing the referendum. And that's the issue we now have across the United States. So to correct the open door that was created by the Supreme Court, we have to go back as citizens and change the amendment because the Supreme Court has to rule according to the amendment. Until the amendment gets passed, then our state and federal congressional leaders cannot really pass any legislation that would hold up in court. So what we are asking you as citizens, if you're so inclined, we have on the table what's called a citizen's pledge. So if you're interested in supporting an amendment, we take these, if you sign them, we forward these on to American Promise, who is the national organization that's leading this effort. And when we meet again with our state legislators, we will let them know that there are X amount of people in their district that really support this and that they should too. We missed our last effort by one vote. One of the things that we learned when we were in Madison is there is what's called the Rule of 17. There are 33 state senators, 22 of which are Republican, the rest are Democrat. We had 16 Republicans say, we support this, willing to sponsor the bill. Because we didn't have 17, the leadership would not bring this to the floor for a vote. Had it come to the floor for a vote, there would have been enough of a majority for it to pass. But that's the rules that we were operating under. Now, we don't know if they'll have the same rules next year. Presumably they would. We don't know until we start talking with the legislators. But we talked to each one of them individually. and get a consensus. Now, with this current election, we've asked a number of our state candidates that are running to sign the candidates pledge. And we've had a good number of them do that. So if you go online to American Promise, you can find a list of candidates who have signed the pledge. It's not in alphabetical order. It's kind of mixed in terms of states, so you just have to kind of run through the list and look to see if your candidate's there. We also have a Wisconsin webpage. So if you go to American Promise Wisconsin, you'll get the most recent updates on what's happening. We do have about a dozen people that have made comments in support of this. Included in that are 2 former Senate majority leaders, Dale Schultz and Tim Cullen. So we have cross-partisan support on this issue. And we hope we get your support as well. So are there any other questions?
I had a couple other comments. First of all, when I got involved in American Promise hating politics. I've never done anything political in my life except vote, because you got to do that. And when I checked out the organization, I was skeptical. Of course, I had Judy twisting my arm, and she's from a farm in Ohio, so she can do that really, really well, as my wife is too. So there's a connection there. No, anyway. So I started checking out American Promise, and these were people that were kind of talked my language. It wasn't about a lot of fluffy ideas. It was about here's what we have to do to fix this problem, and here's the action steps to get there. And I became even more impressed once I met the executive director, and when after we were working with them for about 6 months, because we were talking about bringing different people in, we were planning a town hall, and they guided us saying, well, no, you might not want to talk bring this group to the table, because they're perceived as being either on this side or that side of the issue, either left or right. And we don't want to have that image. We don't operate that way, but we don't want to have that image in front of the public. So it is truly a nonpartisan, bipartisan, cross-partisan, whatever you want to say, organization that is working for this purpose, for the good of Americans. Last thing I want to say, we talked about the 4-way test, which is, what we believe as Rotarians. Rotarians also have a motto, service above self. And this problem will not fix itself. It takes people. It takes people like you to get involved, because our representatives locally, in state, federal, they like the system the way it is, because there's a whole lot of benefit for them with the system the way it now exists. It will take people like us creating pressure and letting them know that unless they fix this problem through an amendment, that they're not going to get reelected. That's what it's going to take. So service above self, please step up. And if you don't join American Promise and help us directly, then do what you can in your local area to do that. Now let's take questions.
Okay, any questions from the audience? Well, yes, please. Where's, okay.
Where's the opposition to this coming from?
Well, our experience in Madison, when we were talking with some of the legislators, is that there was one, I won't say who it was, that particularly benefited from the amount of outside dark money funding. So, like I said, it only took one. It actually took, let's see, we needed 17, there were 22. So there were a handful that found that their interests were involved in supporting the interest of some of the bigger money. And that's just a reality.
And I think you would find that it happens on both sides of the aisle. It's not one side or the other. And one of the problems is in our current system, if one side comes out strongly for it and says, okay, we're going for this, the other side's going to vote no just on principle, just because the other side said, yes, we want this. And so when we're working with, and we experienced this in the U.S. Congress, you have to be really careful of balancing, talking to people at the same time and kind of building a coalition, which is what it takes to pass an amendment. Because if you know how amendment works, which I'm sure people in this room do, it's not an easy thing, which means you have to have across, bipartisan votes in order to make that happen.
Ultimately, once the legislature puts together the language for an amendment, and they have to work on a bipartisan basis to get that language put together, then it comes back to the states for ratification. And then we have the opportunity as voters to vote on it. So it's not an easy process. It's a doable process, but it can be done. And there was one question from, okay.
You said we're at 22 now. Refresh my memory as to how many states need to pass this before it begins to happen.
It takes 38 states to pass the ratification, and then it comes back to us as citizens to vote on it. That's one of the reasons why we're working at the state level simultaneously as we're working at the federal level. It's one of the reasons why the Equal Rights Amendments didn't pass, and that's one of the things that they acknowledged, is that we didn't work at the state level at the same time that we were working at the federal level. Thus, it failed. So
I think if most recall, we have had a referendum passed here in La Crosse, the city of La Crosse, several years ago. I believe so. We've been educated here, and I really appreciate everything you're adding to that. It is such an important issue.
Yeah, there
Yeah,
was a referendum, is that the right word, Pam, that was passed for the city of La Crosse voters in 2018.
and I did check that out on the map before I came. We got, Green Bay had passed the resolution, but we went back to Brown County because that includes a lot more communities, and you're not doing Alloway, Ashwaubenon, De Pere, or Howard, whatever. So in December of 2023, I think it was, we went to our county board, and they passed it with a 92% majority, which was amazing because they don't agree on anything, but they were able to agree on this.
So 2 questions. One is, we do have an election coming up in Wisconsin that may be less gerrymandered than other elections. And so what's your anticipation of there being more opportunities with the new legislature? Do you have any feel for what that might be? And my second question is, are there other options that the Supreme Court could take to reverse their ruling? Like how would that work if is that even a possibility?
Okay. The first question is about, with the anti-gerrymandering, will that change the complexion? Yes, it will. To what degree? We don't know. Okay. The reason we worked primarily with the Republicans the last time in the Senate, because they had the majority. And until we could get the majority convinced that they needed to support this, it wasn't going to come to the floor for a vote. So typically we find Democrats are more likely to support this out of the gate. And we have to use different language when we talk to Republicans versus Democrats because they each have different hot buttons. But once you talk with each group, they see the reality. Plus, it's become an ever-escalating game to the point now that legislators are spending 30 to 70% of their time raising money. They have an office building outside of their office building where they are expected to raise money. and they can buy their committee seats based on the amount of money they raise and the amount of power that that gives them then within Congress. So, yeah, you can see where the influence is.
Yeah, that's scary. So we have part-time legislators and full-time fundraisers. The other question, can the Supreme Court reverse that or change it? Yes, they can. Technically, they can. From a practical point of view, they almost never do that. And they just can't raise their hand one day and say, okay, we're going to change our mind. There needs to be a new case that's brought before them, and which could be arranged. I mean, if there was an indication that they would consider it, sure. And it wasn't just one; it was a series of Supreme Court rulings. But in fact, they could do that. But again, it's really, really rare that they change their minds and they go back. Lee.
I'm not Lee, but who cares, right?
We all care.
Well, I was just looking at this thing and it says between natural persons and artificial entities. What is an artificial entity? And are not the 10% of the 1% individuals that are rich enough
Okay,
that they could continue to do it as a natural person?
Well, the artificial entities refers to corporations, unions, nonprofits, foreign governments. So it's everybody who's not a human, real live person. So that's that natural persons. That's why that distinction. And yes, to your point, that if you just eliminated the not natural entities, then it would go back to individuals, and then you'd have people like, John and I were talking about earlier, all the big tech guys that have gazillions of dollars. Yeah, they can spend as much money as they want, or within whatever the rules are. But that's why the amendment calls for giving it back to the states and following our federalist system, the way the Constitution was originally established and the way this was controlled throughout the entire history up until those Supreme Court rulings came down. So the intent of what we would like to see happen is just turn it back to the way it was, let the states handle it and manage it, and then each state can decide for themselves the way they want to enforce those rules.
Also, if you recall, Feingold and McCain did bipartisan legislation back in about 2000 that had parameters around campaign finance. Okay, so it would allow us the opportunity for the legislature to re-implement rules and regulations that they are now not able to do because of the Supreme Court decision that said money is free speech. Okay. And until we can change that, the floodgates are open. Now, when McCain and Feingold implemented this legislation, they had seen over a 10-year period the amount of funding going into campaigns go from $500 million to $1.5 billion. In 2022, the amount that was being spent was about $17 billion. We don't know what the price tag is going to be now, but imagine if you could spend some of that money on cancer research or in healthcare or in childcare. How many more people, average Americans, would benefit from that? Lee, you had a question. Yeah.
Well, thank you. First of all, Howard and Judy, as you know, we're very supportive of what you're involved with, and we're actively involved last spring when this was coming down. But to put this in perspective, the original states that signed on for the 4-Hour Freedom Amendment were the blue states. Mm-hmm. Okay, the Citizens United was determined to benefit corporations and the Republican side, and so the blue states passed the referendum. Things have changed. In fact, in recent years, the majority of the dark money is coming from the left side of the aisle. And so there's a growing awareness that this is bad for all of us. In fact, the recent study showed that concerns about campaign finance cracked the top 5 of all the issues, the many, many issues nationally. It's number 3. So if Wisconsin, a purple state, could pass the resolution, that sends a real strong message to other states that are in the same position that we are. And so this actually, I believe, next year could be a very, very important opportunity to have something actually happen. Now, it's a journey, because once you get that resolution, you got to get 38 states, and then this language gets negotiated in Congress, and then it comes back. So it's a journey, but what we could do here in Wisconsin is significant. I just hope this group really gets on board when this comes forward next year.
And thank you for your comments, Lee. Actually, we are competing with the state of Pennsylvania to be state number 23, and they've already passed the resolution through one of their legislative houses. So they've got to get it through their Senate, and then we'll see. We got to beat them at that if we're going to make Wisconsin number 23. So, and again, they're a purple state. So.
I think there's a piece of legislation, a bill pending called the Disclose Act. Is that something, I'm thinking this is a long process you're describing. In the meantime, does that bill have a shot? Do you know anything about that? And would that be helpful in the meantime?
I'm not familiar with what that is, and I do know there was a referendum that passed in Wisconsin about something in regards to our Constitution, about funding. But quite frankly, the issue with that is somebody can take that issue to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court's already made a ruling on that. So unless that Supreme Court decision is changed, you may have a false sense of security in that, because it could be contested. But the other item I'm not familiar with. Can you bring us up to date? Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Somehow that got lost, and I think this is an attempt to restore that.
There's kind of a game that's played, and that is when the big money comes in, it comes into a PAC. And then there's a second PAC that's created. And then the big money gets moved from the first PAC to the second PAC. So what they do is they create a treasurer for that second PAC. And then after the elections, that second PAC is closed down before December 31st, in which case then they don't have to do any reporting. But when the money comes in from the first PAC to the second PAC, it comes in as a donation from American Pie to Citizens for Fairness. It doesn't come over as individual A to the second PAC. So the individuals aren't fully disclosed. Now, there is an organization called Open Secrets that you can go to, and it will list donors for each candidate in those situations where the money is actually disclosed. Because there are valid PACs that do disclose versus the dark money PACs. So you can get a sense there of who's financing who. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
So the League of Women Voters nationally, the Disclose Act, I think is what you're talking about, Nora. And if you go to our state website or national, they are advocating for, it's a national bill, and it's called the Disclose Act. And off the top of my head, it had to do with needing to report any contribution over $10,000 comes to my mind, which may be off, but that's what is kind of related. So if you want to learn more about the Disclose Act, which is currently part of our advocacy agenda,
Mm-hmm.
why you can find that on the websites. And we have a couple questions here.
I just wanted to follow up the slide that you showed that indicated that Alan Simpson and John Kerry had been strong advocates for this. Who is championing this issue now? Are there currently serving members of Congress who are kind of leading the charge on this?
Well, not presently in Congress. We were working closely with Mike Gallagher. He had indicated support. And what will happen is when you find somebody that will support this, you have to find a number of people because one person isn't going to hang themselves out there all by themselves. Okay. So we were working with Mike Gallagher and finding other people on his side of the aisle that would support this, as well as people on the other side of the aisle. What made Mike Gallagher a good candidate is he was a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but to be a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus, you have to bring into that caucus with you somebody from the opposite side of the aisle. So that's a good caucus in which to find bipartisan cooperation.
Yep.
So
Just, I wanted to comment a little bit about the corporate versus individual contribution issue. Because as a corporation, you can pretty much bury your political contributions. You can put them on, like, you can put them under legal expense, you can put them under marketing, you can put them somewhere, and say that it's a legitimate business expense. I'm trying to help my business. Whereas as an individual, the guardrails are well established. Donating to a political organization is not tax deductible. So that's one of the issues that actually hasn't truly been addressed by the Supreme Court, and that in allowing corporations to have what they're calling free speech, it's tax deductible where it's not for individuals.
absolutely correct.
I have a list of the states that have already passed this resolution. We've got Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maryland, New Jersey, Virginia, West Virginia, Illinois, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, Alaska, New Mexico, Colorado, Montana, Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, and Rhode Island. So those are the ones that have done it so far.
There any other questions? Comment? Yes.
I'm just wondering if there's a way when you see an ad on the screen of telling whether it comes from dark money or not. And in particular, some ads I notice have the candidate saying, "I approve of this ad," and others not. Is that a telling indicator or not?
It is.
Okay.
Yes. Some are legitimate PACs, some are dark money PACs. So you don't know when it gives the name of the PAC which one it actually is. But if it does say that it's endorsed by the candidate, that's coming from the political party.
I just have a question on how possible would it be to limit the campaign period to, let's say, 3 months or 4 months before an election, and how much money that might save in terms of big contributions?
So an idea that I don't think has been discussed in our group, but again, you're making some kind of a limitation, so therefore it won't pass. But yeah, not a bad idea. Right. Yeah. Yeah. John made a comment. It'll infringe on First Amendment rights because of free speech, and you're preventing somebody from exercising the right to free speech. So yeah, good point, John. So that probably would not pass muster there anyway.
So I was struck by one of your early slides where you talked about the importance of truth.
Truth.
And I'm also struck by the watching the debates where there is supposedly some fact checking supposed to go on, and also bombarded with advertisements where the claims might be perceived as pretty far out there. So is there any movement to try to, even though we can't stop the money in the ads, is there any way of this ad has been fact checked and found to be verifiable? Like, is there anything that consumers can go to?
I would say, okay, I'll let Judy, she does this stuff more than I do, but in my opinion, you need fact checkers to check the fact checkers to check the fact checkers. That's to me, that's the issue. So, and in one of the slides that I did, they accomplished the thing. Nobody believes anything anymore. I mean, and I'm in that camp, and I'm involved with this, and I don't believe anybody anymore because it all is just a bunch of garbage, and you can't, excuse me, but that was the nice word. You can't tell you can't tell who's saying what about what and what's true and what's not. And again, it works to the advantage of the big money. So then now they can manipulate the stuff behind the scene, cut the deals, and there they go skipping down the road.
I think there are a multitude of changes people would like to see, but until you get the big money out of it, you won't have the resources to make it change because there'll be too much money behind making sure it doesn't change. So once you get the big money out, then you can start addressing some of these other issues.
That's a really good point. If you look at, and this is one of my concerns, when you look at all the other amendments, all 22 of them before, none of them took the money away from the people who love to have the money. This is going to be, I think this is a tougher one because it is. We're cutting off the money supply if we get this done. So which means that, yeah, the closer we get to the success, the harder the big money is going to fight to knock it down. So it's going to take absolute commitment from a lot of people in order to make this happen.
We have another question.
Just for clarification, once it gets ratified by 38 states, you say then it has to go back centrally to have another redo at what the actual amendment would be?
Once 38 states, once the language is proposed, it has to come back to the states for people to vote on it, and 38 states have to approve it.
There's another step.
Okay.
So what we're doing now doesn't really do anything legally to create an amendment. What it does is it demonstrates to the Congress, the reps and the senators, that there are people behind this in your state. You better vote for this. So they have to take the resolution, hammer it out within the House of Representatives, then it goes, and they have to pass it. Then it has to go to the Senate. They have to pass it, and the language has to be exactly the same, right down to the periods and the commas and all the rest of that stuff, just like any other legislation. Once they agree and it passes out of there with 2/3 of a vote of each of those bodies, then it goes back to the states for ratification at each one of the state houses. But that's why we want to have people throughout, and this is the way the successful amendments have been done. You want the people on the ground like this, so that when it does come back, then there's another big push to our people, state people. You better pass this thing because we want it. We're all standing behind this. So it's a long, as Lee pointed out, it's a long process. So that's why you have to, keep the fires burning back here, even after we get the resolution done, say we do, because that's just telling them, okay, when it comes around, you better vote for it. But, we need to keep it going.
Are there any other questions? Otherwise, we'll.
Wow, this group, good job, because you had way more questions than anybody else we've spoken to. So good one.
Thank you very much. And let's have a round of applause for our speakers. Just wanted to mention the resolution that passed here in La Crosse in 2018, that corporations are not people and that money is not free speech. Pam Knutson, she was here. Oh, she just left. Oh, darn. Anyway, she was here. Pam Knutson and her husband, Gary, were really the two key people in organizing that. They worked tirelessly on that, and we really thank them for their efforts. And they're still involved with Wisconsin United to Amend. So you may want to look that up, but we certainly thank them. We also want to thank the members of the program committee for putting this program together, the gracious staff here at the waterfront for a fine meal and their lovely accommodations, Rob Ramsire for the technical assistance. We appreciate his help. And before we go, I just have a few more announcements of upcoming events. First, this Sunday, October 13th, Oct-Voter-Fest, which is hard to say without thinking about it. Oct-Voter-Fest will be at the La Crosse Southside Neighborhood Center from noon to 4. The League will have a table there, and it is especially geared to families, so they can come, register to vote, enjoy a meal, and there will also be games for kids there. Our book club is meeting on Monday, October 28th from 6:30 to 8 in the meeting room of the River Place Apartments. They will be discussing the book Islam Without Extremes, A Muslim Case for Liberty by Mustafa Akyol. And more information is on our website, and everyone is welcome to attend. Finally, registration will be open soon for our November 13th Lunch and Learn program titled Project Proven, helping formerly incarcerated people find their path back to the community. And you can find more information about all these programs and all of our upcoming events on our website at our homepage under upcoming events. Couple more very, 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 very important reminders. The last day to register online before the November election is October 16th, which is a week from today. Early in-person absentee voting starts Tuesday, October 22nd. We have schedules on the table in the back there that can tell you where and when you can do early in-person absentee voting. Absentee voting by mail is still a good option, and we do now, for this election, have drop boxes at City Hall. So if you'd like to avoid the mail and put your ballot in the drop box itself, return it to the green drop box at City Hall. And as you prepare to vote, be sure you are informed about the referendums that are on the ballot. Please know that the State League has taken a position against the constitutional amendment referendum related to voter eligibility. And again, there's more information on the back table. Please be sure that you have informed yourself about that issue and that you tell your friends about that as well, because I'm not sure a lot of information has come out about that. Thank you once again very much for coming, and please enjoy the rest of your afternoon.